Hello and welcome to the DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, joined by Riley Fessler and Minna Stein. How you doing, guys?
I've been better.
Why? Let's tell everybody what you're playing.
My building is fighting rats, and they have been since October. And I think I need to move, and I don't want to. So I'm not happy.
But you live in a very beautiful building in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Washington, Riley. Why do you think this is?
I don't know. Well, I had no problems with my building for 2.5 years because I've been here 3. And then this rat problem started, and they seem to have no idea how to deal with it. So all of our amenities are shut down as they tunnel through the walls to kill the rats.
Yeah. Well, that's gross. I would move immediately, probably. But Minna, tell our listeners why Riley's problem is not just a isolated incident and is kind of vaguely relevant to the world.
Because the rats run the city here in DC.
But that sounds like a political commentary. It's not just a political commentary, is it?
No. DC has a very fast-growing rat population, and DC rat management, is struggling to keep up with the rat repopulation. So
they've given up. Didn't the guy say, I can't do anything about it?
Unless the DC residents work with the rat exterminators to try to solve the problem.
So what's the problem, Riley? You don't want to work with the rat exterminators?
Riley, this is your fault.
I don't know what I can do. I have all my trash. I have all my trash in sealed bins. I have all my food sealed away. I don't know.
I bring this up, or I sort of knew we would divert in this direction because, if you're watching American politics and you think, oh my gosh, this really sounds like a banana republic, it's not just that. Decay in American urban areas, infrastructure decay, which, by the way, the last administration was trying to fix our infrastructure. These guys just stopped funding it, right? So all across America, there are roads, bridges, ports, other things that have just stopped going, right? But we've got this kind of decay from within, not just decay at the top. And if you live in New York, you know that there are millions of rats, and that these cities now have rat czars. And if any of our listeners are actually a rat czar, please, give us a shout out on the, various channels we've got here, because we'd love to hear you and maybe have you on the show to talk about rat czaring activity. But it's not just a metaphor, and it's not just gross. It's part of a broader problem that we've got here in the United States of America, a great country, where I just read that a kid on his way to emergency brain surgery in Texas was stopped by ICE, and he and his family were ejected from the country, or arrested and prohibited from going on to the emergency brain treatment that he sought. So isn't that great? What a place. Who's kicking us off with other uplifting stories today?
I am. Senate Minority Leader.
Listen to how he sounds. Don't stop listening, folks. The news is, even if it's depressing. We got to have our eyes open.
That depression was from me looking at my apartments.com tab and seeing that I can't afford any apartments in Bethesda even.
I will say I just looked at the numbers, and 100% of our listeners are rat czars. So hopefully the problem will get solved quickly.
I beseech you.
I'm sure there's a rat story every day. just to see how that goes. All right. Well, we'll find Riley an apartment afterwards. If anybody else can take him in, please let us know. He's very clean, and he's generally pretty quiet, and he cooks a lot. So, you might benefit from that. Anyway, go on.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced that Democrats will reject a Republican-backed government funding bill passed by the House, leaving Congress in a standoff as the Friday at midnight shutdown deadline approaches. Schumer criticized the bill for being drafted without Democratic input and called for a 1-month funding extension to allow more time for bipartisan negotiations. While some Democrats fear a shutdown would be worse than accepting the House bill, Others oppose its provisions, including increased military spending and cuts to domestic programs. With Republicans lacking the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster, the path to avoiding a shutdown remains uncertain.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen on that. The Republicans will say, well, the Democrats didn't want to do our bill. But of course, the Republican bill gives immense power to the president and Musk to continue doing what they're doing. And of course, what they're doing is illegal. And so nobody who's taken an oath of office should actually support this kind of activity. But I want to make a slightly different point. In watching the coverage of this, people are sort of doing the sports coverage. Is it going to go? How many people are they in? Are they out? Are they going to win? Is it going to cross the line? Oh my God! Fine. I don't expect any different from sort of news media that have got to fill the day. But one thing to keep in mind is this: the reason that they're doing a continuing resolution is that there is no way they could pass a budget that does what they want to do. The Republican margin in the House is too small. And if you are a Republican in a purple district and in most red districts and you vote for eliminating Medicare or Medicaid or programs that employ people in your districts or programs that provide vital services to your districts, and remember, red districts get more services from the government than blue districts, then you're going to either vote for it and lose the election, or vote against it and piss off the president of the United States. So they just want to kick the can down the road for another 6 months. And I'll make a prediction, and I know I could be wrong on this one. It's not 100% sure conviction. But I'll make a prediction that there are no budgets passed between now and the 2028 midterms. I predict that we will just live continuing resolution to continuing resolution because they can't do what they want to. And they'd much rather have the president and Musk do things via executive order and fight it out in the courts than do things that would be political suicide for them.
Russia has presented the U.S. with a list of demands for a peace deal to end the war in Ukraine, which includes terms similar to those previously discussed with NATO and Ukraine, such as preventing Ukraine's NATO membership and recognizing Crimea as part of Russia. U.S. officials are divided on how to proceed, with some viewing past negotiations as a potential starting point for peace talks, while others advocate for new approaches. Experts expressed skepticism about Russia's willingness to make meaningful concessions, suggesting that its demands are more about limiting Western military presence and expanding Russian influence rather than seeking a genuine peace agreement.
Yeah, well, of course. Why would they do differently? The war itself is much of a draw. They have greater resources. They feel like they can go longer. And they feel like Ukraine's most valuable ally, the United States, is not on Ukraine's side anymore. And that as soon as Russia makes any kind of an offer that the United States can dress up as, hey, that's half reasonable, they're going to start putting pressure again on Ukraine by removing weapons, stopping financial aid, and so forth. All this is complicated by the fact that now the United States and Europe have different tacks that they're taking on this. So this is likely to end in tears one way or another. Although, if I'm Vladimir Putin, I think momentum's on my side. And so long as Donald Trump is the president of the United States, we're going to get a better deal, and we're going to hold out for the better deal. Of course, the other thing about Putin is deals don't matter to him. He'll take whatever deal ultimately he signs, and he'll break it 6 months later, a couple of years later. That's his pattern. This is all to have a negotiation with a guy who doesn't honor deals, which is why elements of a deal like having international peacekeeping forces or having Ukraine be part of a bigger alliance are the things they most object to, because if they break the deal in the future, it has consequences for them. But if they can keep Ukraine from having a lot of international peacekeeping forces or not keep it from being in NATO, then when they break the deal, they can go right back to doing what they're doing. Riley?
A federal judge ruled that President Trump's firing of Susan Grundmann, the Democratic appointed chair of the Federal Labor Relations Authority, was unlawful, as federal law protects FLRA members from termination without cause. Judge Sparkle Suknanan rejected the White House's argument that such removal protections are unconstitutional, citing longstanding Supreme Court precedent and effectively reinstating Grundmann for the remainder of her term. The case could potentially reach the Supreme Court, where some conservative justices have indicated a willingness to reconsider precedent.
Yeah, well, I mean, each of these cases is going to be fought out, and the strategy of the Trump administration, if you want to be charitable and call it a strategy, is do whatever they want and see what gets blocked. And then if it gets blocked, try a different way to do whatever they want. But meanwhile, do other damaging things with, executive orders and so forth. Another piece of breaking news as we were doing this is that the White House just withdrew the name of the nominee to be the director of the Center for Disease Control just hours before his confirmation hearing was supposed to begin. The guy who was nominated was a guy named Dave Weldon, who's a Florida congressman, and they said he is no longer going to be the pick. Weldon was known, of course, because this is what you would pick to be the head of CDC, right, as an anti-vaxxer who promoted views like vaccines are tied to autism and so forth, which are not true. And apparently, there's a limit to the number of anti-vax, anti-science idiots that they want to put in charge of our healthcare system. Or perhaps there's buyer's remorse on the part of some of the people who in the Senate voted to confirm RFK Jr. now that he's breaking his promises and promoting anti-vax views, saying you should take cod liver oil and as a way of fighting measles, or that measles should just run its course through the population, despite the fact that it's fatal for some people. And also, RFK Jr. has stood down a number of vital advisor groups and other things that support the development of vaccines, and has said that he is going to launch an investigation into the connection between vaccines and autism, which there is none. This has been studied to death. But will he put together a group of people who share his views in order to get an outcome that supports his view? Because they don't really care about facts. They only care about advancing their agendas. Yes, he'll do that. And some of the senators who voted for him are like, okay, I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing that they're like, okay, we're not going to do this again. And we're going to force them to put somebody in to CDC who is less reprehensible. Now, having said that, we don't know who they're going to replace him with. And of course, they can go the route of putting somebody acting in charge of CDC and thus get their own person. My guess, watch for that, because some of the folks in the Senate must be smarting over their egregiously wrong-headed support for the RFK Jr. nomination.
Republicans are considering a controversial fiscal tactic called the Current Policy Baseline to make President Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent without adding to the federal deficit, despite concerns from critics that it would distort the budget process and create long-term fiscal chaos. The tactic would make it appear that extending expiring tax rates costs nothing, but experts warn it could be exploited by both parties to disguise massive spending increases through tax policy changes. While proponents argue it corrects budget scoring rules, opponents, including some Republicans, caution it could lead to a breakdown of the Senate's long-standing fiscal procedures and jeopardize the GOP's agenda.
Look, when you elect a president who's been convicted, or his companies have been convicted of fraud, expect fraud. And the key to fraud in this particular case is cooking the books. And, Minna just said, mouthful there, but what it means is cooking the books, coming up with ways like, let's not count this tax tax bill against the deficit. But does that mean it doesn't actually increase the deficit? Of course not. It does. You just don't see it. You don't have articles about it. And one by one, this administration, which is waging a war on facts and truth, are eliminating agencies that do statistical oversight. And they're going to cook the books. They're going to do it on disease. They're going to do it on trade. They're going to do it on labor. They're going to do and they're going to get rid of the parts of NOAA that, as they have already, that track climate change, so that they don't have data that says climate change is happening. And we are going to live in a world in which the government of the United States, which once felt it was its duty to provide accurate information to the people of the United States, is going to become a purveyor of lies, lies that suit their political agenda. And if somebody else gets elected ever again in the United States in 2028 or whatever, it's going to take years and years to replace or fix the damage that's been done.
EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced a sweeping rollback of 31 environmental regulations targeting rules on coal-fired power plants, climate change, and electric vehicles, which he claimed would reduce regulatory costs and boost American energy dominance. The actions include revisiting the 2009 endangerment finding that greenhouse gases endanger public health, a cornerstone of U.S. climate policy, and rolling back measures on air pollution, clean water, and environmental justice programs. Environmental groups and scientists condemned the moves, warning they would increase pollution and harm public health while vowing legal challenges.
Hey, Lee, it's called the Environmental Protection Agency. What you're doing is harming the environment. Of course, that's what you were hired to do. By the way, the EPA was started by a Republican president. It's not some Democratic plot. But these things not only will damage the environment, but the objectives that are being sought are specious. Riley mentioned, an increasing U.S. energy dominance. The U.S. is the number one energy producer in the world. We are dominant in multiple forms of energy. We have plenty to take care of ourselves forever, until the forms of energy evolve, and we have the ability to adapt and lead on all of these things. What he's not taking in consideration are the costs of environmental damage. Regulations have a cost to companies. Environmental damage has a cost to the entire country, whether it produces catastrophes, extreme weather, whether resources are destroyed that have value, or whether people die of pollution. There are other costs here, but that's not what they care about, because their constituency is the CEO of the energy companies. And Trump said, support me and I will do whatever you want. And that's exactly what he's doing. And whereas in the case of some of the earlier examples we gave, it'll take decades to fix what's broken here. In the case of EPA, I'm not sure it can ever be fixed. I think they can do damage in the course of the next 4 years that will be irreversible. And, Zeldin, who is a shallow politician from New York City who just wants to be in the middle of the MAGA action, is just the worst possible kind of person to lead this agency. And he is demonstrating that every day. Is that it? Those are the stories we've got?
That's what we got.
Okay, well, with that, we fortify you and send you out into your day. Or if you're listening to this at night, we fortify you and send you off to sleep. So sleep, sweet dream. Well, maybe you won't. Maybe you won't be able to sleep. Sometimes I think about this stuff and I can't sleep very well. But then I become really exhausted and fall asleep because I'm exhausted. And that's the pattern. I recommend, if you can't sleep, just stay awake, because then you'll become exhausted. Don't operate heavy machinery, however. after this, because it can be quite dangerous. That's why Minna never operates any of our DSR heavy machinery.
Never after recording.
Never after, yeah, and never sleeps. All right, folks, we will be back with you tomorrow. We did a very interesting episode of Deep State Radio yesterday with Rosa and Corey and Ed, which I would not miss because it really covers a number of really big developments internationally. And we've got your fave, Norm Ornstein and I, coming this afternoon for DSR's Words Matter. So join us for all that. There's a great Civil Consciousness coming up. Join us for the AI Energy and Climate podcast, which is new and gaining an audience quickly for people who are interested in those issues. And of course, listen to the Daily Blast over at the TNR DSR broadcast that Greg Sargent has been hosting for a while to great success. So go do those things, join up, sign up, become a member, support what we're doing, and we'll see you right here tomorrow. Until then, thanks, Minna. Thanks, Riley. Be careful, Riley. Look before you enter a room.
I'll have my anti-rat mallet on me at all times.
Yeah, I would just wear like Doc Martens or something.
Yeah.
The rat can't chew through.
I'm going to put a ring of stones around my bed as an anti-rat ward.
Nice idea. You know what? Another way is maybe one of those like mosquito nets.
Yeah. I think they can chew through that, though.
Well, that's a good point.
Maybe a steel wool mosquito net.
Yeah.
You might need some of this DSR heavy machinery to use against the rats.
Yeah, he really does. Or just have a baseball bat.
Yeah. My Louisville Slugger underneath my pillow.
Yeah, and then you can just, go. I've been watching the TV show The Pit, which is this emergency room thing set in Pittsburgh, which is very good. It's on Max. I highly recommend it. But they had a rat problem there, which plagued the emergency room. So if you're not getting enough rat action, that's a good place to go look.
Oh, I think I've had my fill, but hopefully maybe our listeners will be interested.
If they're feeling left out.
Well, in it, one of the doctors, this is spoiler alert at the very smallest level, but one of the doctors sees one of the rats, and he's like a sort of a farm boy, so he's like not afraid. So he just throws a sheet over the rat, picks up the rat, and breaks its neck. And everybody applauds him. So, Riley, another possibility is just keep a sheet hanging nearby or a towel.
Take notes.
Yeah.
Take notes.
What an idea.
Toss it over the rat and break it. You want to hear a really weird story, by the way, about rats?
Yes.
Then we'll go. Okay, then we'll go. My dad was a scientist. He was sort of an early neuroscientist, and trained in experimental psychology. And when I was a little boy, 2 or 3 years old, he taught briefly. He spent most of his career at Bell Telephone Laboratories, but he taught briefly at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. And he ran studies on rats, one of the things he did. And so he would bring me in sometimes to his laboratory, little 3-year-old, and I'd sit on a stool and I'd play with the rats. And then he'd go, "Okay, are you done?" And he'd go, "Yeah." And then he would hit a big, anodized aluminum garbage pail. And he would take the rats and he would break their necks over the side and throw them into the garbage pail.
Oh, my God.
My little friends. But you had to kill the rats because once they learned the maze, they were of no use to the experiment.
That's horrible.
And there's no rat retirement ranches that they could send them off to. But I was definitely scarred by this.
Understandable.
That's going to be me, though, for any rat that comes into my apartment.
Yeah, you got a lot of
I'm going to wring its neck.
Rat stress disorder. All right. Sorry to make this rat themed, folks. We'll try not to do that tomorrow. Until then, bye.